The dust from the funeral procession still hung in the air when Eleanor Hayes first saw the stranger watching from the edge of the cemetery. His weathered hat pulled low against the harsh Arizona sun that beat down on Nogales in the summer of 1882. Eleanor stood alone beside the fresh grave, her black dress already gathering the red dust that seemed to coat everything in this border town. 3 months had passed since Thomas died, shot down in a dispute over cattle that should never have escalated beyond angry words. 3 months, and yet the pain felt as fresh as the moment Sheriff Dalton had knocked on her door with the news. She was 22 years old and already a widow, her dreams of building a ranch with the man she loved buried alongside him in the hard Arizona ground. The other mourners had drifted away after offering their condolences, leaving her to her private grief. Most people in town had already moved on, their sympathies exhausted by the passage of time. They expected her to do the same, to pack up Thomas's things and perhaps move back east where her sister lived. But Eleanor had no intention of leaving. This land, harsh as it was, had been their dream. She would honor that dream even if she had to do it alone. She became aware of footsteps approaching across the dry grass, measured and careful. Eleanor turned to see a tall man with sun-darkened skin and eyes the color of storm clouds walking toward her. He removed his hat as he drew near, revealing dark hair that brushed his collar. "Madam, I apologize for intruding on your grief," he said, his voice carrying a gentle quality that seemed at odds with his rugged appearance. "My name is Xavier Holbrook. I knew your husband." Eleanor felt her breath catch. "You knew Thomas?" Xavier nodded slowly, turning his hat in his hands. "We rode together 5 years back, moving cattle from Texas to California. He was a good man, one of the best I ever worked with. I only just heard about what happened. I came as soon as I could." Something in his voice told Eleanor he was speaking the truth. Thomas had mentioned a friend from his trail driving days, someone who had saved his life during a river crossing when the current nearly swept him away. "Xavier, that had been the name. He spoke of you," Eleanor said quietly. "He said you pulled him from the Pecos when his horse went under." "Thomas would have done the same for me," Xavier replied. "In fact, he did, more than once, not from rivers but from my own bad decisions. He had a way of seeing the right path when I was determined to take the wrong one." Eleanor felt tears threatening again and blinked them back. She had cried so much these past months that she had thought herself drained of tears, but they always seemed to find a way back. "I did not know he had married," Xavier continued, his voice soft with regret. "If I had known, I would have come for the wedding. I have been up in Colorado, working a ranch near Denver. News travels slow that far north." "We married 2 years ago," Eleanor said, looking back at the grave. "We had plans. We bought land 10 miles west of here near the creek. We were going to raise cattle and horses. Thomas had such vision for what we could build together." Xavier was quiet for a moment, then said, "If you do not mind me asking, what happened? The telegram I received was brief." Eleanor closed her eyes, the memory still sharp enough to cut. "There was a dispute with a neighbor over water rights. Silas Morton claimed our creek ran through his property first, that we had no right to divert any of it for our cattle. Thomas went and talked to him, to work something out peacefully. Silas was drunk and thought Thomas was there to fight. He drew his gun and Thomas never had a chance to explain. Was there justice?" Xavier's voice had gone hard. "Silas hanged 3 days later. The sheriff saw the whole thing happen from a distance. It was murder, plain and clear. But that does not bring Thomas back, and it does not save the ranch. I have been trying to keep things running, but the bank is threatening to foreclose. I cannot work the land alone, and I cannot afford to hire hands." Xavier looked out across the cemetery toward the mountains in the distance. What will you do? I do not know, Eleanor admitted. Everyone says I should sell and move away, start fresh somewhere else. But this was our dream, mine and Thomas's. Leaving feels like betraying everything we planned together. Then do not leave, Xavier said simply. Eleanor turned to look at him, surprised. It is not that simple. I have no money and no help. The bank will take the land within 2 months if I cannot make the payment. Xavier met her gaze steadily. I could help. I have money saved from my work in Colorado, and I know ranching. I could help you save what you and Thomas built. Eleanor felt a mixture of hope and suspicion rise in her chest. Why would you do that? You do not know me. No, but I knew Thomas, and I owe him my life. More than that, I owe him for teaching me what it means to build something lasting instead of just drifting from job to job. If I can help preserve what he started, then maybe I can repay some of that debt. I cannot ask you to give up your life for this, Eleanor said, shaking her head. You are not asking, I am offering. Xavier put his hat back on, adjusting it against the sun. I have spent the last 10 years wandering from ranch to ranch, town to town, never putting down roots. Maybe it is time I stopped running and started building something of my own. If you will have my help, I would be honored to work alongside you to make Thomas's dream a reality. Eleanor studied his face, looking for signs of deception or hidden motives. She saw only honesty and a deep sadness that matched her own. Perhaps he too was running from something, seeking redemption in hard work and purpose. I will pay you back, she said finally. Every cent. This would be a business arrangement, nothing more. Understood, Xavier agreed. I would expect nothing else. I am not here to replace Thomas or to claim what was his. I am here to honor his memory by making sure his dream does not die with him. Those words, simple as they were, broke something open in Eleanor's chest. She had been so alone these past months, carrying the weight of grief and responsibility without anyone to share the burden. Now here was someone offering help without strings, without expectations beyond honest work. All right, she said quietly. If you truly mean it, then yes, I accept your help, but you should know what you are getting into. The ranch is in bad shape. The cabin needs repairs, half the fences are down, and we only have about 30 head of cattle left. Thomas sold most of our stock to buy more land before he died. Then we start with what we have and build from there, Xavier said. When can I see the property? Tomorrow morning, if you like. I am staying in town right now in a boarding house. It was too lonely out there by myself. Xavier nodded. I saw a hotel on the main street. I will get a room there tonight and meet you in the morning. Would 9 o'clock suit you? Yes, that would be fine. Eleanor took a last look at Thomas's grave, silently promising him that she would not let their dream die. Then she turned and walked back toward town with Xavier beside her, his presence solid and reassuring in a way she had not expected. The next morning dawned clear and hot, as most mornings did in southern Arizona. Eleanor waited outside the boarding house in her riding clothes, a worn split skirt and cotton blouse that had seen better days. She had tied her dark hair back in a practical braid, and her face was shaded by a wide-brimmed hat. Xavier arrived precisely at 9, leading 2 horses. I figured we would both need to ride out. I bought this mare from the livery. She is gentle but strong. Eleanor appreciated that he had thought ahead. She mounted her own horse, a bay gelding named Copper that Thomas had given her as a wedding present, and they set off west out of town. The ride took just under an hour, following a rough trail that wound through scrub brush and occasional stands of mesquite. The land was harsh but beautiful in its own way, with distant mountains rising purple against the sky and hawks circling overhead on the thermals. As they rode, Eleanor found herself stealing glances at Xavier. In daylight, she could see more of him. He appeared to be in his early 30s, with lines around his eyes that spoke of years spent squinting into the sun. He sat his horse with easy confidence, moving with the animal rather than against it. His clothes were simple but well made, the clothes of a working cowboy who took pride in his appearance without vanity. "Thomas never mentioned where you were from originally," Eleanor said, breaking the comfortable silence. "Texas, mostly. Near San Antonio. My father was a rancher, had a decent spread before the war. Things fell apart after that. He lost the land, took to drinking, died when I was 16. I have been on my own since then, working ranches all over the West. No family left, a sister in Kansas. We write now and then, but we are not close. She married a farmer, has 4 children, lives a settled life." Xavier glanced at her. "What about you? Where are you from?" "Missouri originally. St. Louis. My father was a shopkeeper. Thomas came through one summer with a cattle drive, stopped to buy supplies. We met, and he started coming by the shop every day with some excuse or other. When the drive moved on, I thought I would never see him again. But he came back the next spring and asked me to marry him. We moved out here to start fresh, away from the war memories and the crowded city." "You miss it? The city life?" Eleanor considered the question. "Sometimes I miss my family, but no, I do not miss the city itself. There is something about this land, hard as it is. It feels honest. Like if you put in the work, the land gives back. No pretense, no false promises." Xavier nodded as if he understood exactly what she meant. They rode on in silence until the ranch came into view. It was not much to look at, Eleanor admitted to herself, seeing it through fresh eyes. The cabin was small, built of adobe and wood, with a covered porch that sagged on one end. The barn was in better shape, sturdy and large enough for a dozen horses. Beyond that stretched the land itself, rolling hills covered in grass that was brown now but would green up with rain. The creek wound through the middle of the property, a thin ribbon of life giving water that had cost Thomas his life to claim. Xavier dismounted and spent a long time just looking, taking it all in. He walked the perimeter of the cabin, examining the walls and roof. He checked the barn, the corral, the water pump. Eleanor watched him work, seeing the careful attention he paid to every detail. Finally, he came back to where she stood holding the horses. "The bones are good," he said. "The structure is sound. It needs work, but nothing that cannot be fixed with time and effort. The land itself is excellent. That creek is worth fighting for. With proper management, you could run 100 head here, maybe more." "Thomas thought we could eventually expand into horse breeding," Eleanor said. "He had a good eye for horseflesh. It is a solid plan. Horses are worth more than cattle if you breed them right. The army is always looking for good stock, and settlers coming west need sturdy animals." Xavier pulled off his hat and wiped his forehead. "If you are serious about this, we need to make a list of priorities. First thing is to secure the property, make sure the fences are solid. Then we need to repair the cabin so it is livable year-round. After that, we focus on building up the herd." Eleanor felt a flutter of hope in her chest, the first she had felt since Thomas died. "You really think we can do this?" "I know we can," Xavier said with certainty. "It will not be easy and it will not be quick. But if you are willing to put in the work, we can make this ranch everything Thomas envisioned." They spent the rest of the day working side by side. Xavier started on the most critical fence repairs while Eleanor cleaned out the cabin, which had been sitting empty for weeks. Mice had gotten into the food stores, and dust covered every surface. She swept and scrubbed, aired out the bedding, and tried not to think about all the times she and Thomas had sat at the small table making plans for their future. As the sun began to set, Xavier called it a day. "We should head back to town before dark." The trail is not safe at night with bandits running around. Eleanor agreed, though part of her wanted to stay, to sleep in the cabin and wake up surrounded by what she and Thomas had built. But Xavier was right. A woman alone in an isolated cabin was asking for trouble. They rode back to Nogales in the fading light, both tired but satisfied with the day's work. When they reached the boarding house, Xavier helped Eleanor dismount. "Same time tomorrow?" he asked. "Yes, and Xavier, thank you for everything." He touched the brim of his hat. "No thanks needed. I am just keeping a promise to an old friend." As Eleanor watched him ride away toward the hotel, she felt something shift inside her. It was not love or even attraction, not yet. But it was the first crack in the wall of grief she had built around herself. The first sign that maybe, just maybe, she could imagine a future that held more than just sorrow and memories. The next 6 weeks passed in a blur of hard work. Eleanor and Xavier fell into a routine, riding out to the ranch each morning and working until sunset. Xavier proved to be everything he had claimed, skilled with tools and livestock, patient with the work, and respectful of Eleanor's space and grief. He never pushed, never assumed familiarity beyond what she offered. When they ate lunch together under the shade of the barn, their conversations were about the work, about the ranch's needs, about the weather and the cattle. But gradually, as the days passed, they began to share more personal stories. Xavier told her about his years wandering the West, about winters spent in line camps and summers moving cattle across vast distances. He spoke of the men he had worked with, good men and bad, and the lessons he had learned from both. He had a dry sense of humor that caught Eleanor by surprise, making her laugh when she had thought herself incapable of laughter. Eleanor, in turn, found herself opening up about Thomas, about their courtship and marriage, about his dreams and plans. Xavier listened without judgment, never trying to change the subject or minimize her loss. He seemed to understand that she needed to talk about Thomas, to keep his memory alive through words and stories. "He used to sing while he worked," Eleanor said one afternoon as they mended a section of fence together. "He had a terrible voice, completely tone-deaf, but he sang anyway. Old ballads mostly, songs his mother taught him." Xavier smiled. "I remember that. During the drive to California, he would sing during his watch. The other men used to complain, said he was scaring the cattle, but I always thought it was brave, not caring what others thought. That was Thomas. He was completely himself, no pretense." Eleanor hammered a nail into place, then paused. "Do you think that is rare, being that authentic?" "Very rare," Xavier said. "Most of us hide parts of ourselves trying to fit what we think the world wants. Thomas did not do that. It is one of the reasons I respected him so much." They worked in silence for a while, the only sounds the clink of hammers and the distant lowing of cattle. Then Xavier said quietly, "He would be proud of you, you know. What you are doing here, fighting to save this place, that takes courage." Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes but blinked them away. "Some days I am not sure I am fighting for the ranch or just too stubborn to let go. Maybe it is both. Nothing wrong with stubborn, long as it is pointed in the right direction." By the end of September, the ranch was starting to look like a working operation again. The fences were solid, the cabin repaired and weatherproofed for winter. Xavier had moved out of the hotel and into the barn, insisting that it made more sense than riding back and forth to town every day. Eleanor had protested at first, worried about propriety, but Xavier pointed out that they were business partners and he would be sleeping in a completely separate building. Eventually, she agreed, recognizing the practical sense of the arrangement. The first time she woke to find smoke rising from the barn, indicating that Xavier was up and starting his day, Eleanor felt a strange mixture of comfort and guilt. Comfort because she was no longer alone on this isolated ranch. Guilt because that comfort felt like a betrayal of Thomas's memory. She was still wrestling with these feelings when Xavier knocked on the cabin door one morning in early October, his face serious. "We have a problem," he said when she opened the door. "3 steers are missing from the north pasture. I rode the fence line and found where someone cut the wire." Eleanor felt anger rise hot in her chest. "Rustlers? Looks that way. The tracks lead north toward the border. Could be small-time thieves or could be someone testing our defenses. What do we do?" Xavier leaned against the porch post thinking. "We report it to the sheriff, though I doubt he will do much. Cattle theft is common enough that unless you catch them in the act, there is not much law enforcement can do. The real question is how we prevent it from happening again." "We cannot watch the entire property every night," Eleanor said, frustrated. "It is too big for 2 people. "No, but we can make it harder for them. We move the cattle closer to the cabin at night, keep them in the south pasture where we can hear if anything happens, and we both sleep lighter." Xavier met her eyes. "I will not let anyone take what you and Thomas built. I promise you that." His intensity surprised Eleanor. Over the past weeks, she had come to appreciate Xavier's steady, calm demeanor. This flash of protective anger was something new, and it stirred something in her that she was not quite ready to name. They rode into Nogales that afternoon to report the theft to Sheriff Dalton, the same man who had arrested Silas Morton for Thomas's murder. Dalton was a heavy-set man in his 50s with a salt and pepper mustache and tired eyes. "I will make a note of it," he said, writing in his ledger. "But Mrs. Hayes, I have to be honest with you. Cattle theft is an epidemic right now. We are a border town, and it is too easy for rustlers to drive stock into Mexico where we have no jurisdiction. Unless you catch them on your property, there is not much I can do." "So we are supposed to just accept the losses?" Eleanor asked, struggling to keep her temper in check. "I am saying you need to protect your own. Hire guards if you can afford it or be prepared to sit watch yourselves." Dalton looked at Xavier. "Who are you again?" "Xavier Holbrook. I am working the Hayes Ranch, helping Mrs. Hayes keep it running." Something shifted in Dalton's expression, a knowing look that made Eleanor bristle. "I see. Well, Mr. Holbrook, I hope you are handy with a rifle. You will need to be if you plan on stopping rustlers." "I can handle myself," Xavier said evenly. They left the sheriff's office with nothing resolved. Eleanor fumed silently as they walked back to where they had tied their horses. "Did you see the way he looked at us?" she said once they were out of earshot. "Like there was something improper going on." "Let him think what he wants," Xavier said. "We know the truth, and that is what matters. It matters because reputation matters. If people in town start talking, it could hurt the ranch. Banks do not like to do business with women of questionable character." Xavier stopped and turned to face her. "Eleanor, you are one of the most proper, upstanding people I have ever met. You are running a ranch alone after losing your husband, working dawn to dusk to honor his memory. Anyone who questions your character is a fool, and their opinion is not worth considering." The use of her first name caught Eleanor off guard. He had always called her Mrs. Hayes before, maintaining proper distance. Hearing her name in his voice, spoken with such conviction, made her heart beat faster. "I just do not want to give people reason to talk," she said more quietly. "Then we will be careful. I will make sure I am always in the barn before you go to bed, always outside until you are up and dressed in the morning. We will be beyond reproach." Xavier's storm-gray eyes were earnest. "I will not let gossip destroy what you are building here." They rode back to the ranch in thoughtful silence. That night, Eleanor lay awake long after she should have been asleep, listening to the sounds of the desert night. She thought about Xavier sleeping in the barn, about his promise to protect what she and Thomas had built. She thought about the way he said her name, the way he had defended her character without hesitation. And for the first time since Thomas died, she thought about what it might be like to not be alone anymore. Not just having someone to help with the work, but having someone to share the burden of decisions and worries and hopes. The thought terrified and attracted her in equal measure. She was still grieving Thomas, still loved him with an ache that had not diminished. But somewhere in the past weeks, another feeling had started to grow alongside that grief, small and tentative but undeniably present. She cared about Xavier, about what he thought and how he felt. She looked forward to their mornings together, to the sound of his voice and the rare smile that transformed his serious face. Was she betraying Thomas by feeling this way? Or was she simply learning that the heart was larger than she had imagined, capable of holding both grief for what was lost and hope for what might be found? Eleanor did not have answers to these questions, so she pushed them aside and focused on what she could control, the work that needed doing and the ranch that needed saving. October passed into November, and the weather cooled slightly, though Arizona winters were mild compared to what Eleanor had known in Missouri. They bought 10 more head of cattle with money Xavier loaned from his savings, slowly building back the herd. Eleanor proved to be skilled with horses, able to gentle even the most skittish animals with patience and soft words. Xavier watched her work with clear admiration, and she found herself performing a little better when she knew he was watching. The rustlers did not return, perhaps deterred by the dogs Xavier bought, 2 large mixed-breed animals that barked at any unusual sound. The dogs also provided company and comfort, especially to Eleanor, who found their presence in the cabin at night eased the loneliness. One evening in late November, Eleanor was cooking dinner in the cabin when Xavier knocked on the door. She invited him in, something she had started doing as the weather cooled, and he hung his hat on the peg by the door. "Smells good," he said, warming his hands by the small stove. "Just stew, nothing fancy, but there is plenty if you want to stay." It had become their pattern over the past weeks, sharing the evening meal and discussing the next day's work before Xavier returned to the barn for the night. They ate in companionable silence for a while, then Xavier said, "I rode into town this morning to pick up those supplies we ordered. I heard something interesting at the mercantile." "What is that?" "The Morton property is going up for sale. Silas's brother wants nothing to do with it, and the bank is handling the auction." Eleanor set down her spoon. The Morton ranch bordered theirs to the north, the source of the water dispute that had cost Thomas his life. She had tried not to think about that land, tried not to let hatred consume her every time she looked in that direction. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. Xavier chose his words carefully. "Because that land includes the upper part of the creek. If someone else buys it, we could end up in the same dispute all over again. But if we bought it, we would control the entire water source. It would secure the ranch's future permanently. We do not have that kind of money. We are barely scraping by as it is. The bank might be willing to extend credit, especially if we offer the combined property as collateral. It is risky, but it could be the key to making this ranch truly successful." Eleanor stood and walked to the window, looking out into the darkness. "I am not sure I could live with owning that land. Every time I looked at it, I would think of Thomas dying because of Silas Morton's greed and drunkenness." Xavier came to stand beside her, close but not touching. "I understand, but Thomas died fighting for water rights. If you buy that land, you are not just avenging his death, you are completing what he started. You are making sure his sacrifice meant something." Eleanor closed her eyes, feeling the truth in Xavier's words. Thomas had been fighting for their future when he died. Buying the Morton land would not bring him back, but it would ensure that his vision for the ranch could be fully realized. You said we would need to use the combined property as collateral. That means if we fail, we lose everything, both ranches. Yes, Xavier admitted. It is a gamble. But I believe in this ranch, and I believe in us. I think we can make it work. The word us hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning beyond its simple sound. Eleanor opened her eyes and found Xavier looking at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. I have not been completely honest with you, Xavier said quietly. When I came here, I told you I wanted to honor Thomas's memory, and that is true, but it is not the whole truth anymore. What do you mean? Eleanor's heart was beating fast now. Xavier took a slow breath, as if steeling himself. These past months working with you, getting to know you, I have come to care about you deeply. Not just as Thomas's widow, not just as a business partner, but as a woman I admire and respect. I did not come here looking for that. I did not expect it. But it happened anyway, and I cannot ignore it anymore. Eleanor felt panic and longing war inside her chest. Xavier, I am still grieving Thomas. I still love him. I know. And I am not asking you to stop. I would never ask that. Xavier finally reached out, gently taking her hand. What I am saying is that I will honor your past while building our future. Thomas will always be part of this ranch, part of your history. I am not trying to replace him or erase his memory. But I am asking if you might be willing to consider a future that includes both your love for him and something new with me. Tears spilled down Eleanor's cheeks. I do not know if I can do that. I feel like I would be betraying him. Thomas told me once, during that drive to California, that if anything ever happened to him, he hoped the people he loved would not stop living. He said life was too precious to waste on grief. Xavier squeezed her hand gently. I am not asking for an answer tonight. I am just asking you to think about it. And whatever you decide, I will still be here, still working this ranch, still your friend and partner. Nothing has to change unless you want it to. Eleanor could not speak past the lump in her throat. Xavier released her hand and stepped back, giving her space. I should go, he said, retrieving his hat. Thank you for dinner. After he left, Eleanor sank into a chair and let herself cry, not just tears of grief, but tears of confusion and fear and something that might have been hope. She thought about Thomas, about their love and their dreams. She thought about Xavier, about his steadiness and strength and the way he made her feel safe and understood. Could she really honor Thomas's memory while opening her heart to someone new? Or was that just a convenient story she told herself to justify feelings that felt like a betrayal? Eleanor did not sleep much that night. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, remembering and wondering and hoping and fearing all at once. The next morning she found Xavier already at work in the corral, training a young horse with patient persistence. He looked up when she approached, his expression carefully neutral. Good morning, he said. Good morning. Eleanor took a breath. About last night, you do not have to say anything, Xavier interrupted gently. Like I said, no pressure, no expectations. No, I want to say something. I need to. Eleanor climbed up on the corral fence to sit where she could see him properly. You are right that Thomas would not want me to stop living. He was always pushing me forward, always encouraging me to be brave and try new things. And you are right that these past months have changed things. I care about you too, Xavier. More than I probably should, more than I thought I could. Xavier had gone still, the horse forgotten beside him. But I am terrified, Eleanor continued. Terrified of dishonoring Thomas's memory, terrified of letting someone else into my heart only to lose them too, terrified of making a mistake I cannot undo. Those are all fair fears, Xavier said quietly. And I would not want you to ignore them. All I am asking is that you do not let fear make your decisions for you. Take your time. Figure out what you really want, not what you think you should want. And the Morton land. The auction is in 2 weeks according to the notice. That is a separate decision. We can pursue buying that property whether or not anything personal develops between us. The ranch needs it either way. Eleanor appreciated that Xavier was keeping the two issues separate, not trying to pressure her emotionally by tying them together. It showed a respect for her that deepened her growing feelings for him. "Then let us talk to the bank," she said. "Let us at least see if it is even possible before we worry about it further." They rode to town that afternoon and met with Mr. Harrison at the Nogales Bank and Trust. Harrison was a thin man with wire-rimmed spectacles and a calculating expression that always made Eleanor nervous. "You want to bid on the Morton property," Harrison said, making notes. "That is ambitious. The two properties together would create one of the largest ranches in the area," Xavier said. "It is a sound business investment, perhaps, but it also represents significant risk. You would be taking on substantial debt with no guarantee you could make the payments." Harrison looked at Eleanor. "Mrs. Hayes, you have already struggled to make your current mortgage payments. What makes you think adding to that debt is wise?" "Because we would control the water source," Eleanor said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "And because we would have more grazing land, which means we could support a larger herd. The ranch would become profitable instead of barely surviving." Harrison did not look convinced. "And Mr. Holbrook, you would be equal partners in this venture." "Yes," Xavier said firmly. "I have money to invest and I am committed to making this ranch succeed." "Are you married to Mrs. Hayes?" Harrison asked bluntly. The question hung in the air. Eleanor felt her cheeks flush. "No, we are business partners." "I see." Harrison leaned back in his chair. "Mrs. Hayes, I am going to be frank with you. The bank's board has concerns about extending credit to a woman, especially one in your situation. A widow with a hired hand, no matter how proper the arrangement, does not inspire confidence in conservative businessmen." "That is absurd," Eleanor said, anger rising. "I have made every payment on time. The ranch is improving. What does my being a woman have to do with my ability to run a business?" "I am simply telling you how the board sees it," Harrison said with a shrug. "However, if you and Mr. Holbrook were to marry, the situation would be different. The bank would be more inclined to approve the loan if you were operating as a traditional family unit." Eleanor stood abruptly. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Harrison. We will consider our options." Outside, she paced angrily while Xavier untied their horses. "Can you believe that? Essentially telling me I have to get married to be taken seriously as a businesswoman." "It is infuriating," Xavier agreed, "but not surprising. The world is not fair to women, especially women trying to run businesses. So what do we do? Just accept that we cannot bid on the Morton land because some stuffy bankers think a widow cannot handle her own affairs." Xavier was quiet for a moment, then said carefully, "There is one option we have not discussed." Eleanor stopped pacing and looked at him. "What?" "We could get married. Not for romance or pressure or any of the things I said last night. Just a practical business arrangement that would allow us to secure the loan and protect the ranch." Eleanor stared at him, shocked. "You cannot be serious." "I am. Think about it practically. We already work together every day. We already live on the same property, which has people gossiping anyway. Making it legal would silence the gossips and give us the leverage we need with the bank." Xavier's expression was earnest. "It does not have to change anything between us emotionally. We could maintain separate lives, separate sleeping arrangements, everything as it is now. Just with a legal document that makes us partners in the eyes of the law." "That is insane," Eleanor said, but even as she spoke, part of her mind was racing ahead, considering the possibility. Marriage is supposed to be about love, not bank loans. In an ideal world, yes, but people get married for practical reasons all the time. Arranged marriages, marriages of convenience, marriages for social position. At least with us, there would be mutual respect and friendship. Eleanor put her hands to her head, feeling overwhelmed. I need to think about this. It is too much to decide right now. Of course, take all the time you need. Xavier mounted his horse. But the auction is in less than 2 weeks. If we are going to do this, we need to decide soon. They rode back to the ranch in silence, both lost in their own thoughts. Eleanor's mind was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. The practical part of her recognized the sense in Xavier's proposal. They did work well together. They did respect each other, and securing the Morton land could mean the difference between the ranch's success and failure. But the emotional part of her recoiled at the idea of marrying someone she did not love, of standing before a preacher and making vows that felt like a betrayal of Thomas. Even if Xavier said it would be a practical arrangement, marriage was marriage. It would tie them together in ways that went beyond simple business, and if she was being honest with herself, there was another complication. She did have feelings for Xavier, feelings that were growing stronger every day. Marrying him in a practical arrangement when she was starting to care for him romantically seemed like a recipe for heartache. Over the next few days, Eleanor wrestled with the decision. She went about her work mechanically, her mind always circling back to the same questions. What would Thomas want? What was the right thing to do? Could she really marry Xavier knowing her heart was divided between past love and present possibility? On the 4th day after the bank meeting, Eleanor rode into town alone and went to the cemetery. She knelt beside Thomas's grave, running her fingers over the letters carved into the headstone. I do not know what to do, she said aloud, not caring if anyone heard her talking to the dead. Part of me thinks you would want me to do whatever it takes to save the ranch. But part of me thinks this is going too far, that marrying someone else so soon is wrong. The wind stirred the dry grass around the grave, but no answers came. Eleanor sat there for a long time, remembering Thomas's laugh, his optimism, his unwavering belief that everything would work out if they just kept trying. Finally, she spoke again. Xavier said he would honor my past while building our future. I think he means that. I think he is a good man, Thomas, maybe as good as you in his own way. If I do this, it would not mean I love you less. It would just mean I am choosing to keep living, to keep fighting for what we dreamed about together. Saying the words aloud helped crystallize her thoughts. Thomas would not want her to sacrifice the ranch for sentiment. He would want her to be practical, to make the hard choices that would ensure success. And if that meant a marriage of convenience with a man she respected, he would understand. More than that, if Eleanor was honest with herself, she wanted to marry Xavier. Not just for the ranch, though that was important, but because over these past months, he had become essential to her life in ways that had nothing to do with fence mending or cattle. He made her laugh. He listened when she needed to talk. He understood her grief without being consumed by it. He was patient and kind and strong, everything she needed in this difficult time. Maybe love did not have to look the same way twice. Maybe it could be different with Xavier than it had been with Thomas, just as valid even if it was quieter and more gradual. Maybe the heart really was big enough to hold both past and present, grief and hope, memory and possibility. Eleanor left the cemetery with a sense of peace she had not felt in months. She rode back to the ranch and found Xavier working on the cabin's roof, replacing shingles damaged in a recent windstorm. Xavier, can you come down? I need to talk to you. He climbed down the ladder, wiping his hands on his pants. What is it? Eleanor took a breath, steadying herself. "I have been thinking about your proposal, the practical marriage arrangement. And I think we should do it. Not just for the bank loan, though that is important, but because I think we make a good team. I think we could build something lasting together, something that honors what Thomas started while creating something new." She met his eyes. "But I need you to understand something. I am not ready for a real marriage, not yet. I am still grieving, still figuring out who I am without Thomas. If we do this, it has to be patient. No expectations, no pressure." Xavier's expression was serious. "I understand, and I want you to know something too. When I proposed this as a practical arrangement, I was not being completely honest with myself. Yes, it makes business sense. But I also care about you, Eleanor. I have for a while now. If we get married, even as a practical arrangement, my feelings are going to be real. I am not going to be able to turn them off just because we are keeping things businesslike." "I know," Eleanor said softly, "and I care about you too. Maybe more than I am ready to admit, so maybe this is not just practical. Maybe it is us being brave enough to try something new while acknowledging that it is going to be complicated and messy and maybe even painful at times." "I can live with complicated and messy," Xavier said, a hint of a smile playing at his lips. "I have never been afraid of hard work." Eleanor felt something unlock in her chest, a weight lifting that she had not fully realized she was carrying. "So we are really doing this, getting married so we can buy the Morton land and save the ranch. And because we want to," Xavier added. "Because somewhere along the way this became about more than just the ranch. It became about building a life together." He held out his hand and Eleanor took it, feeling the calluses from years of hard work, the strength and steadiness that had come to mean so much to her. "When?" she asked. "As soon as possible. We need the marriage certificate before the auction if we want the bank to approve our loan. That only gives us a week." "I know. We will keep it simple. Just the preacher and a couple of witnesses. Nothing elaborate." Eleanor nodded, her mind already racing ahead to all the details that would need handling. Then another thought struck her. "Where will we live? After we are married, people will expect us to share the cabin. We will figure it out. Maybe I take the bedroom and you take the loft. Or we partition the cabin, create 2 separate spaces. Whatever makes you comfortable." The fact that he was already thinking about her comfort, about maintaining boundaries even within marriage, made Eleanor's decision feel even more right. This was not a man who would take advantage or push for more than she was ready to give. This was a man who would honor his promises, who would give her time and space to heal while being there when she needed him. They went into town the next day and spoke with Reverend Matthews, an elderly preacher who had conducted Thomas's funeral. If Matthews was surprised by their request, he hid it well. "Marriage is a sacred institution," he said, looking from Eleanor to Xavier and back again. "Are you certain this is what you both want? Mrs. Hayes, your husband has not been gone even a year." "I am aware of that, Reverend," Eleanor said firmly, "but life does not stop just because grief demands it. I am choosing to move forward, to honor Thomas's memory by completing the work we started together. Xavier has been instrumental in saving the ranch. Marrying him is both a practical decision and one I am making with a clear conscience." Matthews studied her face, then nodded slowly. "Very well. If you are certain, I will perform the ceremony." "When were you thinking?" "This Saturday, if possible," Xavier said. "We need the marriage certificate by Monday for a business matter. That is quite sudden. I understand, but our circumstances require speed." Matthews agreed, though he insisted on meeting with them separately first to ensure neither was being coerced. Eleanor appreciated his diligence, even if it was unnecessary. The days leading up to the wedding passed in a blur of activity. Eleanor had no family in town to invite, and Xavier's only family was his sister in Kansas, too far away to reach in time. They decided to keep the ceremony private, with just the Reverend and 2 witnesses from town, Mrs. Patterson, who ran the boarding house, and Mr. Chen, who owned the mercantile, both of whom had been kind to Eleanor during her widowhood. Eleanor did not have a wedding dress, so she wore her best dress, a simple blue cotton that Thomas had always said matched her eyes. Wearing it felt right, like bringing Thomas's blessing to this new beginning. On Saturday morning, Eleanor stood in the small church and watched Xavier walk up the aisle toward her. He wore a new suit, the first time she had seen him in anything but working clothes. He looked handsome but uncomfortable, tugging at his collar. When he reached her side, he smiled nervously. "You look beautiful," he said quietly. "You look trapped," Eleanor teased, surprising herself with the levity. "Just not used to formal clothes. Give me a horse and open range any day." Reverend Matthews cleared his throat. "Shall we begin?" The ceremony was brief and simple. Eleanor repeated the vows, her voice steady even as her heart raced. When it came time for Xavier to speak, his voice was clear and strong, as if he was making promises he fully intended to keep, practical arrangement or not. "You have rings?" Matthews asked. Eleanor and Xavier exchanged glances. In their rush to arrange everything, they had forgotten about rings. Xavier quickly pulled off a leather cord he wore around his neck, from which hung a small silver ring. "This was my mother's," he said, handing it to Matthews. "It is not much, but it is real." Matthews blessed the ring and handed it to Xavier, who slipped it onto Eleanor's finger. It was too large, sized for a man's hand, but Eleanor curled her fingers to keep it from falling off. The gesture, unplanned and imperfect, felt more meaningful than any expensive jewelry could have been. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Matthews said. "You may kiss the bride." Xavier looked at Eleanor, silently asking permission. She nodded slightly, and he leaned in to press a chaste kiss to her lips. It was brief and respectful, but Eleanor felt it all the way to her toes, a spark of electricity that promised more if she was ever ready for it. They signed the marriage certificate, and suddenly it was done. Eleanor was no longer Eleanor Hayes, widow. She was Eleanor Holbrook, married woman, rancher's wife. The change felt both monumental and strangely anticlimactic. Mrs. Patterson and Mr. Chen congratulated them warmly. Eleanor accepted their good wishes with as much grace as she could muster, though part of her wanted to explain that this was not a typical marriage, that it was practical and careful and not at all a betrayal of Thomas's memory. But she kept silent, knowing that explanations would only make things worse. After the ceremony, Xavier helped Eleanor mount her horse. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Strange," she admitted. "Like I just did something momentous, but I am not sure exactly what it means yet." "That is fair. I feel that way too." Xavier swung into his own saddle. "But we did what needed doing. Now we just take it one day at a time, same as always." They rode to the bank Monday morning with their marriage certificate, and the change in Mr. Harrison's demeanor was immediate and infuriating. "Congratulations on your marriage," he said with an oily smile. "I must say, Mrs. Holbrook, you work fast." Eleanor bristled at his tone but kept her voice level. "Thank you. Now about the loan for the Morton property." "Yes, yes. With you and Mr. Holbrook married, the board is much more comfortable extending the credit. I have drawn up the papers here." They spent the next hour reviewing documents and signing their names. By the end, they owned a loan so large it made Eleanor's stomach churn with anxiety. But they also had the bank's commitment to support their bid at the auction. The auction took place the following Saturday at the courthouse. A dozen bidders showed up, some legitimate ranchers looking to expand, others speculators hoping to flip the property for profit. Eleanor and Xavier sat together in the back row, holding hands for courage. The bidding started low and climbed quickly. Eleanor's heart sank as the numbers rose higher and higher. Just when she thought they would have to drop out, several bidders began withdrawing, unwilling to go further. It came down to Eleanor and Xavier against one other rancher, a grizzled man named Davies who owned property to the east. Xavier bid $5,000. Davies countered with $5,200. Xavier looked at Eleanor and she nodded. They could afford it if they were very careful. $5,500, Xavier called out. Davies scowled but did not counter. The auctioneer called it twice more, then brought his gavel down with a sharp crack. Sold to Mr. and Mrs. Holbrook for $5,500. Eleanor let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. They had done it. Against all odds, they had secured the land that would make their ranch viable for generations to come. Over the next few weeks, they worked harder than ever, now managing two properties that needed to be integrated into one coherent operation. Xavier hired 2 ranch hands, young men who needed work and were willing to learn. With extra help, the work became more manageable, and Eleanor found she had time to think about things beyond just survival. She thought about Xavier and the strange marriage they had entered into. He had kept his promises completely, never pushing for more than she was ready to give. They had partitioned the cabin, creating a private bedroom for Eleanor and a separate sleeping space for Xavier near the main room. They worked together during the day, ate meals together, discussed plans and dreams. But at night, they retreated to their separate spaces, maintaining the careful boundaries they had established, except Eleanor was finding those boundaries less necessary as time passed. She had started to notice little things about Xavier: the way he hummed while he worked, the careful attention he paid to injured animals, the patience he showed teaching the young ranch hands. She noticed the way he looked at her sometimes when he thought she was not watching, with a longing and tenderness that made her heart ache. Christmas approached, their first as a married couple. Eleanor found herself wanting to make it special, not just going through the motions but actually celebrating. She baked cookies using her mother's recipe, decorated the cabin with pine branches, and even bought Xavier a gift: a good knife with a bone handle that he had admired in the mercantile. On Christmas morning, they exchanged gifts by the fire. Xavier gave her a leather-bound journal for recording ranch business and personal thoughts, with her new name embossed on the cover. "For all the things you need to remember," he said, "business and otherwise." Eleanor ran her fingers over the letters of her name. "It is perfect. Thank you." They spent the day together, taking a break from work to simply enjoy each other's company. They rode out to survey their combined property, looking at everything they had accomplished in just a few months. 2 ranches saved from foreclosure, cattle and horses thriving, buildings repaired and solid. "We did good work," Xavier said as they sat on a hill overlooking the creek. "We did," Eleanor agreed. Then, gathering her courage, she added, "Xavier, I want to thank you for being so patient with me, for not pushing or expecting more than I could give. You do not need to thank me for that. I meant what I said about honoring your past. I know you did. That is what makes it so remarkable." Eleanor turned to face him. "But I think I am ready for things to change. Not dramatically, but gradually. I am ready to start thinking about this as a real marriage, not just a practical arrangement." Xavier's eyes widened. "Are you sure? I do not want you to feel obligated just because we are legally married." "I am not feeling obligated. I am feeling hopeful. You have become my best friend, Xavier. Somewhere along the way, you became essential to my happiness. I still love Thomas, and I probably always will. But I am learning that I have room in my heart for more than just grief. I have room for you too if you are willing to be patient a little longer while I figure out what that looks like." Xavier reached out and took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "I will be as patient as you need. There is no rush. We have time." "Do we, though?" Eleanor asked. "Life is so uncertain. Thomas taught me that. Maybe instead of being cautious, we should embrace what we feel. Take chances instead of always protecting ourselves." "What are you saying?" Eleanor leaned in and kissed him. Not the brief ceremonial kiss from their wedding, but a real kiss full of longing and promise and the hope of new beginnings. Xavier responded immediately, cupping her face with his hands, kissing her back with all the emotion he had been holding in check for months. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Xavier pressed his forehead to hers. "I love you, Eleanor." "I have for a while now, but I did not want to say it and make things harder for you." "I know. I think I have known for a while." Eleanor smiled, feeling lighter than she had in a year. "And I love you too. It is different from what I felt for Thomas, but it is real and it is growing stronger every day." They sat together on the hill as the winter sun set over their land, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Eleanor leaned against Xavier's solid warmth and felt at peace for the first time since Thomas died. The grief was still there, would probably always be there in some measure. But now there was also joy and hope and love, proof that the heart could heal and expand and embrace new possibilities without erasing the past. As winter turned to spring, Eleanor and Xavier's marriage deepened from a practical arrangement into a true partnership of heart and soul. They removed the partition in the cabin, combining their lives fully. Eleanor moved into the bedroom with Xavier, nervous but ready for this next step. Their first night together was tender and sweet, both of them careful with each other, honoring the significance of the moment. Xavier proved to be a patient and considerate lover, attuned to Eleanor's needs and emotions. Afterwards, lying in his arms, Eleanor felt a profound sense of rightness, as if this was exactly where she was meant to be. The ranch continued to thrive under their joint management. The cattle herd grew, and Eleanor's skill with horses became widely known in the area. They started breeding horses specifically for the cavalry, developing a reputation for quality stock that commanded premium prices. The money that had been so tight began to ease, allowing them to make improvements and hire more help. In May, Eleanor realized she had missed her monthly courses. The realization filled her with a complicated mixture of emotions. She had wanted children with Thomas, had mourned the fact that they never had time to start a family before he died. Now she was carrying Xavier's child, a new life that represented their future together. She told Xavier one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, their evening ritual. "I am pregnant," she said simply. Xavier turned to her, his expression cycling rapidly through surprise, joy, and concern. "Are you all right? How do you feel about it?" "I feel blessed," Eleanor said honestly, "and a little scared, but mostly blessed." Xavier pulled her close, his hand resting gently on her still flat stomach. "A baby, our baby. I never thought I would have this, a family and a home and someone to love." "You have it now," Eleanor said. "We both do. We built it together from grief and hope and hard work." The pregnancy was not easy. The summer heat made Eleanor nauseous, and as she grew larger, the physical labor of ranching became difficult. Xavier insisted she rest more, taking on extra work himself and relying more heavily on the ranch hands. Eleanor chafed at the restrictions but knew he was right to be cautious. They prepared the cabin for the baby's arrival, clearing space for a cradle that Xavier built himself from cottonwood. Eleanor sewed tiny clothes and blankets, marveling at the idea that soon there would be a child to wear them. She wrote long letters to her sister in Missouri, repairing their relationship that had frayed during Eleanor's years in Arizona. She wanted her child to know family, to have connections beyond just her and Xavier. On a cold January night in 1884, Eleanor went into labor. Mrs. Patterson came out from town to assist, having helped deliver dozens of babies over the years. Xavier paced outside, prevented from entering by Mrs. Patterson's firm insistence that birthing rooms were no place for men. After 12 hours of labor, Eleanor gave birth to a healthy baby boy. When Mrs. Patterson finally let Xavier into the room, he approached the bed with awe-struck reverence, staring at the tiny bundle in Eleanor's arms. "A son," Eleanor said softly. "We have a son." Xavier carefully took the baby, holding him as if he might break. "He is perfect. What should we name him?" Eleanor had thought about this moment many times during the pregnancy. "I would like to call him Thomas Xavier, if that is all right with you." "Thomas for my first husband, Xavier for my second. Both good men, both part of this family story." Xavier's eyes filled with tears. "You would do that. Honor both of us. You said you would honor my past while building our future. I think our son should honor both as well. He is the bridge between what was and what is." Xavier leaned down and kissed her gently. "Thomas Xavier Holbrook it is. He is going to grow up knowing about both the men he is named for, knowing the love and sacrifice that built this ranch and this family." As Eleanor watched Xavier cradling their newborn son, she felt a profound sense of completion. The journey from grief to hope had been long and difficult, full of doubt and fear and hard choices. But here, in this moment, she could see that every step had been necessary. Thomas's death had been a tragedy that shattered her world. Xavier's arrival had been the beginning of healing. And now this baby represented the future they had built together, a future that honored the past while embracing new love. The years that followed were full of hard work and deep joy. Little Thomas, as they called him, grew into a sturdy boy with his mother's determination and his father's steady temperament. Eleanor and Xavier had 3 more children over the next 8 years, 2 daughters and another son, each one a blessing that expanded their hearts and their family. The ranch prospered beyond their initial dreams. By 1890, the Holbrook Ranch was one of the most successful operations in southern Arizona, known for quality cattle and exceptional horses. Xavier proved to be an astute businessman as well as a skilled rancher, making smart investments and expansions that secured their family's future for generations. Eleanor never forgot Thomas. She kept his picture in a place of honor in their home, and she told their children about their ranch's history, about the young man who had dreamed of building something lasting on this harsh but beautiful land. She took the children to visit Thomas's grave on the anniversary of his death each year, teaching them that love did not end with death, that memory could be honored alongside new life. Xavier never felt threatened by Eleanor's continued love for her first husband. He understood that her heart was large enough for both of them, that her love for him did not diminish what she had felt for Thomas. Instead, he encouraged her to share those memories, to keep Thomas's spirit alive in their family story. On a spring evening in 1895, Eleanor and Xavier sat on their porch watching their children play in the yard. Little Thomas was now 11, helping with the ranch work alongside his father. The younger children chased each other through the grass, their laughter carrying on the warm breeze. "Do you remember the day we met?" Eleanor asked, leaning against Xavier's shoulder. "At the cemetery. You were grieving and alone, and I was trying to repay a debt to an old friend. Did you ever imagine we would end up here, with all of this?" Eleanor gestured at the ranch, the children, the life they had built. "No," Xavier admitted. "I imagined helping you save the ranch and then moving on, drifting like I always had. I never imagined finding home. I am glad you stayed. I am glad you were patient and kind and willing to honor what I had lost while helping me build something new." Xavier kissed the top of her head. "I told you I would honor your past while building our future. I meant every word. You did more than honor my past. You helped me integrate it into our future, made it part of our family's foundation. Our children know they come from love, multiple loves, and they are richer for it." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set over their land, painting the sky in brilliant colors. The ranch spread out before them, a testament to hard work, sacrifice, and the courage to love again after loss. The cattle dotted the hills, the horses grazed in the pastures, and their children played in the safety and security of a home built on both grief and hope. Eleanor thought about the young widow she had been, standing beside a fresh grave and wondering if life held anything beyond pain. She thought about Xavier, the cowboy who had arrived seeking to honor a debt and stayed to build a life. She thought about Thomas, whose dreams had seeded everything they had become, whose memory lived on in their eldest son and in the land they tended. Life had not been easy. There had been droughts and difficult births, rustlers and financial scares, childhood illnesses and injuries. But through it all, Eleanor and Xavier had faced each challenge together, their love growing deeper and more complex with each passing year. As darkness fell and stars began to appear in the vast Arizona sky, Eleanor reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. Grief had been her teacher, showing her the depths of loss and the strength required to endure. Love had been her healer, not erasing the pain but giving her reason to continue despite it. And Xavier had been her partner, steady and true, honoring her past while building their future one day at a time. The children's voices called them inside, hungry for dinner and bedtime stories. Eleanor stood, Xavier's hand warm in hers, and together they walked into their home, into the life they had created from sorrow and hope and the courageous choice to love again. Years continued to pass, bringing more changes and blessings. Thomas grew into a fine young man, eventually taking over much of the ranch's daily operations. He married a schoolteacher from Tucson, bringing her home to the ranch and starting a family of his own. Eleanor delighted in being a grandmother, finding new purpose in teaching her grandchildren the same lessons she had taught her own children about resilience, love, and honoring the past while building the future. The younger Holbrook children also thrived. Their eldest daughter, Sarah, surprised everyone by becoming a skilled veterinarian, one of the few female veterinarians in the territory. She traveled throughout Arizona and New Mexico, treating livestock and earning respect in a male-dominated field. Their second son, Daniel, inherited Eleanor's gift with horses and started a successful training operation that supplied the army with cavalry mounts. Their youngest daughter, Catherine, moved to Phoenix and became a teacher, but returned to the ranch every summer with her own growing family. In 1902, Arizona was still a territory, but talk of statehood was growing. Eleanor and Xavier, now in their 40s, sat on their porch as they did most evenings, watching the sunset paint their land in golden light. They had gray in their hair now, and their bodies bore the marks of decades of hard work. But their love had only deepened, refined by time and shared experience into something precious and enduring. "I received a letter from my sister today," Eleanor said, holding the envelope. "She wants to visit next spring, bring her whole family. I have not seen her in almost 20 years. "That would be wonderful," Xavier said. "It is past time she saw what you built here, met her nieces and nephews and grandnieces and grandnephews." "I have been thinking lately about everything that happened, about the path that brought us here." Eleanor looked out at the land they had fought so hard to save. "If Thomas had not died, none of this would exist as it does. I would still love him, still be married to him." You would be somewhere else entirely, probably still drifting. Our children would not exist. It is a strange thing to contemplate. Life is full of paths not taken, Xavier agreed. We cannot know what might have been, only what is. And what is pretty damn good. Eleanor laughed at his mild profanity. It is more than good. It is extraordinary. We took tragedy and grief and transformed them into something beautiful and lasting, not by forgetting or moving on, but by integrating the pain into something larger. Thomas would be proud of you, Xavier said. Of everything you accomplished, everything you built. This ranch is his legacy as much as ours. And he would be grateful to you for honoring his memory instead of trying to erase it. Not every man would be secure enough to share his wife's heart with a ghost. He is not a ghost, Xavier corrected gently. He is part of our family's history, as real as any of us. Young Thomas knows his namesake was a good man who dreamed big dreams. That is not ghost, that is legacy. They sat in peaceful silence as the day faded into night. Lights appeared in the windows of the main house where Thomas and his wife lived with their children. Smoke rose from the bunkhouse where the ranch hands were settling in for the evening. The sounds of cattle and horses drifted on the breeze, familiar and comforting. Eleanor reached over and took Xavier's hand, the same gesture they had shared thousands of times over the years. His hand was rough from work, scarred and calloused, but it fit perfectly with hers. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" "For arriving when you did. For staying when you could have left. For being patient when I needed time. For loving me even when I was broken. For helping me heal without losing the pieces that mattered. For honoring your promise to build our future while respecting my past." Xavier lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "Eleanor Holbrook, loving you has been the greatest privilege of my life. Every day with you, even the hard ones, has been a gift. I would do it all again without hesitation. Even the parts where I was difficult and grieving and probably impossible to live with. Especially those parts. They were when you needed me most, when I could show you that love could be patient and steady and not just passionate words. Besides, you were never impossible. Challenging sometimes, but never impossible." Eleanor leaned against his shoulder, feeling his solid warmth, his steady heartbeat. "I love you, Xavier Holbrook. I love Thomas and I love you, and somehow both those loves exist together in my heart without contradicting each other. I used to think that was impossible, but you taught me otherwise. Love is not a finite resource," Xavier said. "It expands to fill the space we give it. You loved Thomas with your whole heart, and when I came along, your heart made room. That does not diminish what you felt for him. If anything, it honors it by proving that his love taught you to be capable of loving deeply." They stayed on the porch until the stars were fully visible, brilliant points of light in the vast desert sky. Then they went inside to their home, the home they had built together from grief and hope and determined love. They climbed into the bed they had shared for years, comfortable with each other's presence, and fell asleep in each other's arms. In the following years, more grandchildren arrived, filling the ranch with noise and joy. Eleanor and Xavier gradually stepped back from the day-to-day operations, trusting Thomas and the younger generation to carry forward what they had started. They took time to travel, visiting Eleanor's sister in Missouri and Xavier's sister in Kansas, reconnecting with family after years of focusing solely on the ranch. But they always returned to Arizona, to the land they had fought so hard to save. It was in their bones now, as much a part of them as their own flesh and blood. The ranch was not just a business or a piece of property. It was a living memorial to Thomas's dreams, to Eleanor's resilience, to Xavier's steadfast love, and to the family they had built together. On a warm evening in 1910, with Arizona finally achieving statehood, Eleanor and Xavier stood in the cemetery beside Thomas's grave. They came often, but this visit felt significant, a moment to reflect on everything that had transpired since that day in 1882 when Xavier first approached Eleanor in her grief. "We did it," Eleanor said softly, looking at the weathered headstone. "We saved the ranch. We raised a family. We built something lasting. We honored his dream," Xavier added, "and we built our own dreams alongside it." Eleanor placed fresh flowers on the grave, the same ritual she had performed hundreds of times over the years. "Thank you, Thomas, for loving me, for dreaming with me, for teaching me that love was worth the risk. And thank you for sending Xavier to help me carry on when I did not think I could." Xavier stood silently beside her, his arm around her shoulders. He had long since made peace with the fact that Eleanor would always love her first husband, that Thomas would always be part of their family story. Instead of resenting it, he had embraced it, understanding that Eleanor's capacity to love despite loss was part of what made her extraordinary. As they walked back to their horses, Eleanor suddenly stopped and turned to Xavier. "I need to tell you something. I need you to know that if I had never met Thomas, if I had met you first, I would have loved you just as deeply. You are not second best or a replacement. You are the love that saved my life and gave me a future. You are the man I chose every single day to build a life with." Xavier's eyes grew wet with emotion. "Eleanor, I have always known that. You have shown me in 1,000 ways over the years, but hearing you say it means everything." They mounted their horses and rode back to the ranch as the sun set behind them, painting the sky in brilliant colors. The land stretched out before them, their land, earned through sacrifice and hard work, and the courage to keep going when everything seemed lost. Years continued to pass, bringing the joys and sorrows that come to all lives. Eleanor and Xavier grew old together, their bodies slowing but their spirits remaining strong. They celebrated their children's and grandchildren's achievements, mourned losses, and continued to find joy in simple moments together. In the spring of 1920, Eleanor fell ill with pneumonia. Despite the doctor's best efforts, she did not recover. Xavier sat beside her bed, holding her hand as her breathing grew labored. "I am not afraid," Eleanor whispered. "I have lived a full life, loved deeply, built something lasting. I have no regrets. Please do not leave me," Xavier said, tears streaming down his face. "I am not ready to lose you." "You will never lose me," Eleanor assured him. "I will always be with you just as Thomas has always been with me. Love does not end with death, remember? We proved that together." "I love you," Xavier said, his voice breaking. "I have loved you for 38 years, and I will love you forever." "I know, and I love you. Thank you for honoring your promise, for respecting my past while building our future. Thank you for being patient and kind and steady. Thank you for loving me." Eleanor's breathing was growing shallower. "Take care of the ranch. Take care of our family. And when your time comes, do not be sad. We will all be together again." Xavier held her hand as her breathing finally stopped, as the woman he loved slipped away peacefully in the home they had built together. His heart shattered, but even in his grief, he knew she was right. Love did not end with death. It continued, transformed but unbroken, connecting past and present and future. Eleanor was buried in the cemetery beside Thomas, with Xavier's plot reserved on her other side. At the funeral, their children and grandchildren gathered to remember a woman who had faced tragedy with courage, who had rebuilt her life from grief, and who had loved deeply and well not once but twice. Xavier lived another 5 years, spending his time with family and keeping Eleanor's memory alive through stories and the continued success of the ranch. When he finally joined her in 1925, 3 generations of Holbrooks mourned a man who had honored his promises, who had loved without jealousy or insecurity, and who had helped build something lasting. The ranch continued to thrive under the family's stewardship, passing from generation to generation. The story of how it began became family legend, told and retold to children and grandchildren. They learned about Thomas, the young dreamer who had first envisioned what the land could become. They learned about Eleanor, the widow who had refused to give up even in her darkest grief. And they learned about Xavier, the cowboy who had arrived seeking to honor a debt and stayed to build a legacy. The original cabin was eventually replaced by a larger house, but the family preserved it as a historical building, a reminder of humble beginnings. Thomas's grave and the graves of Eleanor and Xavier became a family shrine, visited regularly by descendants who wanted to pay respect to the ones who started it all. Decades after their deaths, a great-great-granddaughter named Emma stood beside those three graves with her own family. She was the latest generation to run the Holbrook Ranch, now one of the largest and most successful operations in Arizona. As she looked at the three headstones standing together in the desert sun, she reflected on the unusual love story that had created her family. "Tell us the story again," her young daughter asked, tugging on her hand. Emma smiled and began the familiar tale. A long time ago, in 1882, a young woman named Eleanor lost her husband Thomas to violence. She was heartbroken and alone, struggling to save the ranch they had dreamed of building together. Then one day, a cowboy named Xavier arrived. He had been Thomas's friend, and he wanted to help honor Thomas's memory by saving the ranch. "And they fell in love," her daughter said, knowing the story by heart. "Yes, but not right away. First they became partners, working together to save the ranch. Xavier was patient and kind. He respected Eleanor's grief and never tried to replace Thomas. He said he would honor her past while building their future, and he kept that promise. Over time, Eleanor's heart healed enough to love again. She learned that you could love two people without diminishing either love, that the heart expands to hold what it needs to hold. And they got married and had children and built the ranch into something amazing," her daughter finished. "That is right. And all of us are here because Eleanor had the courage to love again after loss, and because Xavier had the wisdom to honor what came before while building something new. They taught us that grief and hope can exist together, that honoring the past does not mean being trapped by it, and that real love is patient and kind and willing to make room for complicated emotions." As Emma's family drove away from the cemetery, the sun set over the land that three people had fought so hard to save. The Holbrook Ranch stretched across thousands of acres now, supporting dozens of families and producing some of the finest cattle and horses in the state. But it all started with grief and hope, with a widow's determination and a cowboy's promise to honor the past while building the future. The story of Eleanor, Thomas, and Xavier became more than just family legend. It became a testament to the resilience of the human heart, to the possibility of loving again after devastating loss, and to the truth that honoring what was does not prevent building what can be. Their legacy lived on not just in the land and the business they built, but in the example they set for how to face tragedy with courage, how to love with generosity, and how to build a future that honors rather than erases the past. In the end, Xavier had kept his promise completely. He had honored Eleanor's past, respecting her love for Thomas and keeping his memory alive in their family. And he had built their future, creating with Eleanor a life of purpose and meaning, raising children who knew they came from love, establishing a legacy that would endure for generations. It was everything he had promised that day in the cemetery, and more than either of them could have imagined when their journey together began. The Holbrook Ranch stood as proof that love could triumph over grief, that patience and respect could build something lasting, and that the human heart was capable of extraordinary expansion when given the chance. It was a story worth remembering, worth passing down through generations, a reminder that even in our darkest moments, hope could be found and futures could be built if we were brave enough to try. And somewhere in the desert wind that blew across the ranch, in the mountains that stood eternal watch, in the creek that still flowed through the land, the spirits of 3 people rested peacefully, knowing that their love and their dreams had created something that would endure long after they were gone, a legacy of courage and hope and the transformative power of love.